Well, most of our military requirements start, unfortunately, with someone noticing at the bottom of the contract something to the effect that thou shalt provide a carrying case. And unfortunately, that very often is the last thing that people want to start thinking about. We encourage you so much to latch onto that, think about it from the beginning. Don't treat it as a nuisance, but treat it as an opportunity to add value to to what you're trying to do, not just for the customer that's writing the check, but add value and function for whoever is using that for whatever mission that they've got to accomplish. That's the ultimate goal, is that somewhere out there this is going to aid a warfighter. What can we do to make the case be a part of the system, not just an annoyance component at the end? So that starts with an analysis of what what products are essential, what products are going to be the first out of the box when it's deployed, and it starts with the awareness that there's more than one mission. We've got to set this up so that it's easy to retrieve. In trade show world, someone told me that they have a saying that says that this is gold going out and it's dirty lead coming back. Unfortunately, troops in the field tend to do this, to operate in the same mindset. They absolutely are dependent on this gear, but at the end of the mission, it's how fast you can throw it back in the box and get the heck out of there without being without having the delay. And very often, it's the highest ranking person that takes it out. It's the lowest ranking person that gets to put it back in, who didn't see how it was configured in the case. Typical mil-spec labeling is great if you've got time to open a manual and look at pictures. We do our very best to encourage our customers in mil-spec world to adapt some of the things from civilian world where you have actual visual keys, an actual photo of the contents that may relate to the part numbers that they need to know. But in turn, very often there are a lot of accessory cables and cords. One of our strengths is that we have quite a number of stock pouches, or in turn, we're aggressive in creating custom sewn items to support that mission. Sometimes those take the form of wallets that are basically a combination of tools, connectors, things that they need for a specific procedure that, again, are, for example, with air-ground support equipment. That case may be set up to support several different aircraft. So if we can pull out one pouch or one wallet that is specific for a C-131, and if they use that same test gear on an F-35, there's another subset that they can pull out and use and not have to continually intermix. If it's radio gear that's going to be deployed, say for an emergency situation or whatever, again, attention to what is the first thing out of the bag. If it means that you're hanging an antenna and you need that cable, let's have that available and possibly sub-packaged so that you don't have to move the whole case to accomplish that. And then taking a step backwards from the get-go, we know that the military mission is defined by a much, much more harsh environment. Usually buried somewhere in those contracts are specifications, but it's also entirely likely that some of the folks involved didn't know enough about this procedure to either include the right specifications, or they've included specifications that are fairly general with a lot of subcategories that haven't been defined. So there needs to be early on a dialogue about what is the real world environment that this is going into. For example, in the earlier wars of Desert Storm and then our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan, there are issues of dust and grit. that no one had ever thought of that they'd have to deal with in that magnitude. And normally, some of the cases that we use are watertight, so they would protect the gear very well. But one major manufacturer of cases refuses to acknowledge to this day that their latches do not function in a grit environment. So we do our best to steer our customers away from that particular brand, for example. And in turn, in military world, you've got to be prepared for temperature extremes. And we always get into a gray area there, especially with the molded plastic. There's a certain point where plastics start to soften. They still may retain their enough strength to accomplish the mission. In some cases, they don't. For example, we did some work for a unit that literally lines the bottom of a vehicle with the cases and then throws their other gear on top. Everything went fine until they had a project that they were training with a cohort in Africa, close to the Sahara, and they literally had a couple of large black items absorb so much sunlight that they melted their way right into that layer of cases underneath. So theoretically, the temperature range was something that the cases could have stood, but if we had known of the of the environment that those are going into and the potential consequences, we probably would have steered them away from the plastic molded cases. We've reached out to form relationships with folks who do metal forming. That in turn gives a better platform for those extreme environments to let us create cases that are that can be have active cooling mechanisms, not just fans but literally air conditioners if necessary to keep high performing electronics functioning in a high temperature environment. That has nothing to do with the case shipping environment. It's just the miserable operating environment that people have to work with. We in that environment as well, the cases are not always going to be drug across a nice, smooth convention hall floor. Some cases do better, some wheel designs do better. That's an area that we think is ripe for a lot more improvement, but off-road aspects of wheeled cases are something that some solutions are better than others. And that's an area that we can assist with as well. In a civilian application, one of my customers hired a young lady that was a dynamo, but she was not capable of lifting the load that they had expected people to do with their demo gear. So a special set of cases were made for her to break that down into 3 cases instead of 1. Within a year, the big sturdy men who were supposed to be handling these big solid one-piece demo cases had all to a person requested getting that smaller set of gear. A couple of the folks had back injury, and some of them had accumulated back problems over the years. The military has reviewed those in light of recent decisions to involve women in every aspect of of combat operations, and rediscover the same process that ergonomic injury is a tremendous factor, and they've doubled. Generally they're doubling down on weight restrictions, and again that's an area that we can offer a lot of help with. When it comes to custom fabrication, we have our so-called Pac-Lite product that's a hollow core combination of plastic and metal that's far lighter to the traditional options, far better environmental response. And again, we have the options with metal to play the gauge up or down, go to different alloys. And again, with the plastic cases, we have a variety of thicknesses and styles that are available. So sometimes, again, it's just the knowledge of going back to that war store that I spoke of and saying, hey, for this environment that you're going into, let's use the airline white cases that reflect the energy since you're going into such a severe environment. And that, just one little thing like that could be the difference between success or failure. On the ergonomic front, placement of handles can be a huge issue. I have one situation where some folks were able to eliminate a lot of damage simply by adding an extra pair of handles that allowed two people to carry the device. One stood on one side, one the other. By placing the handle so they could reach down and lift it about 3 to 4 inches off the ground and be comfortable to carry. Then if one of them stumbled, it only fell 3 or 4 inches and wasn't nearly as much of a hazard. In turn, the difference in acceleration of picking something up and carrying it 18 to 24 inches off the ground versus 3 to 4 inches means it is getting 5, 8, 10 times the shock. And that one factor alone was enough to eliminate a lot of damage.